You're very welcome to the next episode in our Work From Anywhere series. Today we're going to be speaking about the future of global mobility and business travel with Matthew Parsons, Alex Felstead, and for once the other side of the table will be Orly Crow. Two resources to have a think about. We've got a great article by Harvard Business Review on why your company needs a digital nomad policy. There was also a great talk by Lynn Oldham. She's the CPO of Zoom. She talks about 4 emerging work patterns, including borderless or digital nomads. Next week, we're going to be speaking about the digital nomad jobs of the future. We're going to have Margot Miller, Tonge Achoto, and Meyer Sataka. So tune in next week, and for now, enjoy episode 6. Hi everyone, you are very welcome to the next episode in our Work From Anywhere series. Today we're going to be talking about the future of business travel and global mobility. And it's fascinating because if you look at it pre-pandemic, we basically had business travelers who were serviced by the corporate travel managers and the travel management companies. They were going typically for less than 28 days. And you also had expats serviced by, let's say, the global mobility and relocation agencies. They were going permanently, typically for more than a year. But now what's happened is we have these remote workers who want to remote work abroad, typically going for more than 28 days and less than a year. What does that mean? What does it mean for the future of business travel and global mobility? With that in mind, I'd like to bring on our wonderful panel here today. Thank you very much, Alex and Matt and Orly, for being part of this episode in our Work From Anywhere series. I think it would be great to start with maybe Alex, just giving us a little bit of introduction to yourself, the global mobility executive, and kind of sharing how you see the current state of Work From Anywhere.
Absolutely, and thank you, John, for the invite and the opportunity to speak with some great panelists. My name's Alex Felstead. I'm one of the co-founders and directors at the Global Mobility Executive, and we really provide global mobility and HR leaders the platforms and the content to be able to share key challenges and strategies with their peers. So from my perspective, I've been in and around mobility for the past 10 years or so. And we've seen a huge amount of change in that time. And really our goal and mission is to provide these platforms for mobility and HR leaders to continue to evolve the role of mobility, elevate the role of mobility, and really provide key learning for these industry leaders. But in terms of sort of the challenges that mobility have faced, it's been an interesting sort of 18 months. I think mobility leaders have really taken the remote working, the working from anywhere piece by the scruff of the neck, whether they've wanted to or not. I think that's going to be up to them to decide. However, it's been fascinating to see how their skill sets is enabled businesses to continue, the business continuity and facilitate the business demands when it comes to employees working from locations where they're not hired. And I think over the past 18 months, of course, the compliance issues have been the main challenges, and they still continue to be a headache. But it's also been interesting to see how what companies are doing in terms of working from anywhere and enabling businesses to be more flexible with their employees. I think it's also been a huge bonus for mobility leaders as they've been put in front of that senior, C-suite leadership team. They're very much consulted now when it comes to the challenges around remote working. So it's really elevated the role of mobility, and it'd be good to see how we continue that journey as we move through the next few months post-pandemic.
Completely agree, Alex. I think it really is in many ways for the global mobility leaders, it's their opportunity to shine because they have a lot of the knowledge to deal with these risks, and it's their opportunity to step up to the plate and, like you said, get in front of those C-suite decision makers. Maybe then turning that to the business travel space then, Matt. So Matt's part of Skift, one of the big, let's say, travel industry publications and thought leadership. I'd like to ask you, are you seeing something similar on the business travel space for business travel managers, for example, and how are you seeing it in the current state of work from anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think overall, this whole movement is a really good thing, and I think where the travel manager side of it, they are still, they were kind of dealing with the refunds and just this, crisis mode for the first 6 months to a year. To be fair, they're still in a bit of a crisis mode. Then they were dealing with all the refunds and a lot of admin there. And I think now perhaps it's too early to say if they're being really involved. I mean, I'm talking to a lot of security officers, human resources personnel about this topic more than anything, rather than the travel managers. And I think the main focus now is that return to office piece. And the bigger companies that do have travel managers and travel buyers, their offices are pretty much closed, and they're trying to work out how to get the staff back. So it's still early days, and it's just a huge experiment as well at the moment, I think.
Would you think, Matt, just teasing that out a bit, is that mainly because a lot of travel managers tend to report into finance and procurement as opposed to global mobility that reports into HR? I mean, is that playing a factor there? So why, or is there some other factors that we might be missing?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've just got perhaps a lot on their plates at the moment. I mean, I think the office is the main thing at the moment for big companies. Not everyone's suddenly people are working remotely, but it's not a kind of a permanent thing just yet. There's still surveys being done, and I think at some point travel managers will get into that more. But at the moment, it's kind of risk, it's HR, it's mobility. So you don't get the impression that they are fully into this yet. I mean,
interesting.
That's my take.
And what about yourself, Orly? You're already part of Festive Road, one of the leading business travel consultancies globally. Tell me what you're seeing. I mean, what's your view of the current state of work from anywhere? And of course, you've been pushing for this pre-pandemic. You've been one of the early adopters in many ways before people were really talking about it. Tell us how you see it, Orly.
So myself, I've been working remotely since this past 7 years. We are ourselves a virtual first business. We never had any office, and we work on 3 continents. This is also how we operate with our clients. And we have our tagline, we like to say that we have that unique position and very privileged position where we sit right in the middle of the business travel ecosystem, because we work both with travel managers and travel leaders and travel suppliers. So we have that vantage point that's very interesting. And as we like to say, we're on a mission to create better travel and meetings management. And I think now this makes so much sense now that we're all trying to, rethink. We actually have to rethink the way that we used to do things. So this is actually my first take. We have reached a tipping point, and I mean, no one has a crystal ball, but I want to say it. I don't think we will ever go back to the way that things were before. It's a myth, because things are changing for good. There has been a tremendous awareness now raised around the fact that work will find you wherever you are. Work is not a place. And I tend to agree with you, Matt. Huge discussions that we hear and that we see with our clients is the return to the office, pretty much as a first phase. And at the same time, what we're seeing as well is that travel leaders, exactly to echo what you said, Alex, this crisis has helped them to elevate their role, because out of a sudden, travel became the cornerstone of the crisis. Because when it hit 15 months ago, the travel manager was the go-to person. Who do we have out there? Because we need to repatriate them. And then they had to open the dialogue with internal comms, with IT, with security, and then finance, risk. And now that the crisis is over. Let's be bold. Let's say over, even with we're still navigating, this. I think, and this is my second take, it's where travel meets the workplace. This is exactly where we are right now. If you look at the work from anywhere phenomenon, and what we are seeing is that the most progressive companies are looking at reimagining their strategy. And we'll get there in the conversation, and we're trying to help them. We gifted to the industry a framework that we call the Purposeful Travel Framework, meaning now when you are going to envisage meetings or business trips, you need to think in terms of what's the purpose of my trip, because of many reasons. The environment, you said it, finance because of budgets. How do you justify a trip? Perks as well. Maybe is it finally the time when a leisure trip and a business trip will merge more than ever before? So fascinating shifts happening right now.
Yeah. If I could just ask something, I mean, I talked to one travel manager and he was saying, basically for their career, it was one step forward, but then two steps back. So like you say, when they were the go-to person when the crisis started, so completely elevated, like Alex said as well, just high visibility. But now companies are going to, cut back on their travel programs because of Zoom, because of the finances or whatever, ongoing restrictions. So now it's, they would have lost, travel managers would have lost team members. So now they're kind of going to be taking a step back. So now is the time, especially now, to kind of just order to a new position, I think.
It's a fascinating one, Matt, and already all of the things you spoke on there. The key message coming through is a shift. This was the question I'd ask then for all of you: is this a structural shift or is this a passing fad? I mean, there are some people that argue it's a passing fad, and some people say it's a structural shift. Am I hearing from all of you that it is a structural shift, or do you have doubts and think this is something that might be a passing fad?
I mean, from my perspective, yeah, and what we're seeing, it's absolutely a structural shift. I think at the beginning it was a quick fix. It was a temporary thing. For businesses to carry on, trading and to be able to carry on working around the world. But I think now we're at the point where, and it's not working from home, working remotely isn't for all industry sectors. It doesn't work in manufacturing, for instance. So, some sectors it doesn't apply, but where it does apply, I think organizations will have to continue to show flexibility to their employees. I think what we'll probably see is somewhere in the middle with a hybrid type model, with a couple of days in the office, a couple of days remote. There will be, of course, companies that are, want to say, yeah, you can work from anywhere. I think it's very difficult to do that. I don't know if anyone's got it quite right yet. But I think if they don't show any flexibility, they could end up losing that talent to companies who are going to offer it. And, one comes to mind is obviously JP Morgan are very much digging their heels in over this, and it'll be interesting to see how that pans out for them.
Very good point. I mean, what yourself, Matt, and Aurelie, I can sense in your voice, Aurelie, this is definitely a structural shift you're seeing. Are you seeing that also in the travel industry? And likewise, Matt, as well. Are you both seeing that this is a structural shift, or could this be a passing fad?
I'd say structural. I mean, this is going in. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, it's an experiment, but it's going to be very sort of deeply embedded changes going forward. So yeah, this is a pivotal moment, I'd say. Yeah.
And likewise, Aurelie, I guess you're the same as well. Huh?
Absolutely, and it's a pivotal moment. And on the top of that, what we foresee is an uptake of small meetings as well in a context where you have a more dispersed workforce. There's going to be even more needs for people to actually meet up, and this will also influence the way that you manage travel and meetings within organizations. Definitely.
Okay. And also, just to add to that, I think we often forget that we're human beings, and being connecting someone face to face is part of the human experience, and I don't think that can be totally taken away from you.
And to your point, Alex, what's last week we actually hosted a webinar, and what came during the conversation was super interesting. There's basically, you can have three strategies if you think about the workplace. You have the resident strategy where everybody goes back to the office. You have hybrid, and then you have virtual first. Companies have gone public on that. Dropbox, for example, they've just published, I think it's yesterday, They don't talk about offices anymore. They call their former offices studios. And it's an environment for collaboration. The furniture, the office space has been thought through so that you can adjust it based on your needs. It's for your employees to meet up if they want to, impromptu concerts if they want to. So this is already a first very, very clear strategy. And what came up last week during the conversation, and I really love that, is many organizations opt for hybrid because of their lack of strategy. Because hybrid involves a lot of different things. And the reality as well, let's be very honest, we're all trying right now to figure out what hybrid means. Mm-hmm. There is no clear right or wrong. And I would say there's nothing wrong, because what works for one company might not work for the other. This is where the company culture here jumps in. And the vision of your leaders and what you want to achieve, what type of talent you want to attract. Gartner published last week a very interesting report based on knowledge worker, because they actually think that, of course, the more remote work applies very nicely for what we call knowledge worker, but maybe not for all of them. So there's, is it sector specific? Is it job specific? Is it skill set specific? These are all the question marks right now.
Yeah.
Some great points there, Orly. I mean, taking kind of a big picture look at global mobility and business travel, we'd like to talk to you about, for example, if Alex, you're speaking to a lot of global mobility managers, what are the biggest pain points they're facing now in the context of work from anywhere? I'll ask the same for you guys as well, Matt and Orly. But starting with you, Alex, what are the biggest pain points you're hearing from global mobility leaders now at the moment?
Yeah, and there's a lot of pain points, I think, and it all stems from people wanting flexibility, wanting to work, in a location where they're not, where they're not hired, and all the challenges that come along with that. We did a poll, actually, an event that we hosted this morning, and 65% of the participants did have a sort of policy or guidelines for international remote working. However, it's so difficult to pin down, because it's difficult to create a formal policy when, country to country, there are so many limitations and variations. So I think that is a big challenge, because to find the right fit that fits globally, that you can apply to a global workforce is difficult. Of course, the administrative complexities and companies having the resource to be able to facilitate these requests. A lot of them are being agreed between business leaders and the employee first, and then taken to mobility saying, can you deliver this? And mobility is like, well, hang on a minute, actually, there are you willing to pay for it? Are you willing for this to come out of your budget? Because there is quite a high cost associated with it.
If you take that point further, then, Alex, at the end of the day, with the compliance costs, and you're looking at the employee benefit, what's it worth? Is there not, for example, in many cases, an ROI framework where you can just basically balance what's the compliance cost going to be in this individual case and what's the employee benefit? At the end of the day, if you've got a top performer that's worth a huge amount to you, you are probably going to want to bend over backwards. But is that something that you see, that there is a kind of an ROI framework in some of the best practices out there, some of the leading global mobility managers?
Absolutely. But there's also a moral question to, if say you've got these high performing and they decide to go to, say they're in, in the UK, and they decide to go to a low cost country like India, to work flexibly, then, can you morally pay that person the salary from? I don't think you can. It's a difficult one. Yeah. And the next thing with the big challenge that we're seeing is it's all very well saying, oh yes, you can go and work. Business leaders saying you can go and work from anywhere. But do they have the right leadership capabilities to manage international remote employees, and how do you incorporate the company culture as well into this? I think they're the sort of big focus areas for global mobility leaders at the moment.
Maybe one of the things we mentioned in the last webinar as well, if you get a chance, take a look at the Netflix company culture, and they really tease this out, because for the average, let's say, company, the top performer is 2 to 3x the performance and the productivity of the average performer. But if you go to, let's say, technology or creative industries, for example, the top performer is 10x the average, let's say, the performance of the average worker. So obviously the framework, the ROI framework for the tech companies is going to be very different for those highly mobile industries compared to, for example, manufacturer. And maybe then next step, then looking at it for the business travel industry, then Matt, I mean, what are you seeing as the biggest pain points? Are you seeing this come up as a major flashpoint for, let's say, the travel managers and industry leaders in business travel that you're speaking to?
Not really. I mean, like I said before, it's that, can we get back to the office safely? Can we travel internationally? No is the answer. When's that going to happen? These are the pain points, I think. They've got a kind of hangover from dealing with their corporate travel agencies. Obviously, the bigger companies will lean on agencies. What's happening, with those relationships? Obviously, the travel stopped. The travel's going to go down in the future. So, do they renegotiate their contracts? Do they find a new agency in the future? So, I think that's keeping a lot of people busy. This is coming up to 18 months, 2 years. So within that time, there's been a lot of renewals, and that's can be quite stressful. And I think in conversations as well, sustainability's come up a lot. I mean, again, this is something that's going to fall directly with the travel manager more than anyone else, in terms of kind of, the carbon calculations and that kind of thing. So again, whether someone's going to go to India and what salary are they going to get, maybe not a corporate travel issue just yet, from what I can tell.
I get you. But I'd imagine at the same breadth, they're probably dealing cross-functionally with the global mobility teams, I'd imagine as well. It's certainly that work from anywhere challenge. It is very much cross-functional. It can't be done in a silo, let's say. But then if you look at it on your side then already, are you seeing a lot of openness to the phenomenon in the business travel space, or maybe less so? Or are people starting to engage with this?
Actually, yes. Well, we're lucky as a consultancy to actually work with all those travel leaders who are very progressive, who have a strong appetite to do things differently. So we have the hive mind and the great minds, which is fascinating when we have the conversations with them. The openness, I would say yes, because if you look at, there are actually two categories. If you think about that, there are the younger talents or the Aurelis of the world who actually want to see the world and who are excited to go on a business trip because you want to do your pleasure thing. You're gonna use this experience to see the world, and they're very much aware that there's a talent pool and there are people out there who are going to be attracted by the company and who are going to ask about the travel policy and all those different. Can we even call it a travel policy in the near future? That's also a question. I'm anticipating a little bit on other questions here, but that's one category. Then you have the other category where actually, and to echo what has already been said, road warriors, or do we actually have to take that trip again? And there is that reality as well. There's a chunk of people who felt some sort of relief not to be on the road all the time. Now they've taken more healthy habits of not being on a plane all the time. But overall, yes, there is an openness, but it's very difficult to execute. So on the paper, big yes. On the why, yes. On the how, it's a headache.
Yeah, sure.
Because of the reasons we already mentioned, because I would also add, based on what we already mentioned, real estate in the picture. If you think about companies who are reducing the size of their office, but then real estate and meetings, it actually creates new needs, even technology needs, in terms of now I need to book meeting spaces, or do I make my own space bookable online? When I'm going to talk to my suppliers out there, can I find somebody who can help me? Even the simple thing within a country. If I'm in the US, for example, US is a very large country. If I have my workforce that is completely dispersed in Europe, what's the best place to meet? What's the most cost-effective place to meet? How do I then negotiate my deals with my suppliers? Maybe I will not negotiate a hotel RFP based on a transient overnight, but I might negotiate blocks. Because I'm gonna move maybe 100 people, at a time. These are all the shifts. So the openness in that sense, yes. In the pure work from anywhere, it's a huge question mark.
Yeah, I know. I think maybe to jump in there as well, let's be also realistic. I think the concept of allowing people to work from wherever they want, it is a total myth. You can't just say, unless a company has entities in 220 countries around the world and in the US in every state, then it's just not realistic. But at the same time, there are ways to be focused about how you implement this and look at this.
Yes.
So your existing legal entities or for example, digital nomad visas are coming up as something that are worth a certainly look. But maybe then,
Absolutely.
Alex, from the global mobility side, pretend you're two global mobility managers, one for a large corporate with 10,000 employees, and the other a smaller startup, maybe 500 employees. How would they operationalize work from anywhere? What are you hearing there, and what are the different approaches?
No, absolutely. And to go back to your point about the work from anywhere, and I think it is a myth in the sense that it's more of a branding exercise. I don't think anyone has actually nailed it. I don't think, like you said, it's not possible to offer all locations around the world. I think that there is some companies that are getting close to it. But like you said, they tend to be the smaller tech startups. Who would be
the leaders that come to mind off the top of your head?
So with tech startups, it's companies like, it's not really a startup, it's been around for quite a long time, but Reddit, I know, are offering this, an opportunity. They can come to them and say, I want to work from X location, and they'll make it happen. But they don't have a huge amount of, employees, or a huge amount of requests. With smaller companies, they can manage it easily because they can do it by a case-by-case basis and make it very much an employee value proposition. But the Googles, the Spotifys, Facebooks, etc. I think for them it was an opportunity to get a bit of marketing and promote their business and say, yes, we work from anywhere. But in reality, when they consulted the rest of the functions, whether it's mobility, finance, legal, they realized they had to scale that back. And like you said, they now it's only based on the entities where they have entities. But there are several companies now, bigger companies, 10,000 plus, of which are doing like a WWM or work from wherever month. So they go somewhere for 30 days. Or 10 days if they don't have an entity in that location, and that they will facilitate that for them. Of course, it's based on the company if they actually cover the travel costs, but I think that'll be footed by the employee. So yeah, it's interesting, but there's the other aspect is, yes, there's the digital nomad visas. Some countries are thinking, well, how can we leverage this? And you see it's majority of the companies that have been suffered heavily from the lack of tourism. So like the UAE, etc., offering these digital nomad visas, but what does that mean in reality? And we're also seeing countries, governments who, like Malaysia, are mandating that employees hired in the country must work in Malaysia.
Just to jump in there, Alex, I was talking to a Croatian bank a few months ago, and they've gone fully remote. For obviously not for the bank, the staff and the actual physical branches, but the rest. And they had the policy was, you can go wherever you like, but if we need you to come in for a crisis, then you have to get back to the office within 24 hours, which I thought was really clever, actually. That could be Australia, from Croatia. So
that is, and I think it's interesting that the financial services, I think that's why JP Morgan are taking the steps they are, but it's difficult with financial services because it's so heavily regulated. People need to be careful about what work people are doing in certain countries. If they're not licensed in that country, there could be some serious issues there.
But this is also where, if you're a travel supplier, what I foresee in the next, maybe not today, tomorrow, but the next 5 days, there's a clear opportunity to come up with new offers on the market to accommodate that. Because, sectors like finance or that are heavily regulated, you might need, like firewalls, whatever. You cannot use public Wi-Fi, but there are technical solutions to actually enable that. So, it all comes down to exactly what you've mentioned as well earlier, John, about the ROI of doing it. Why would I want to do it? What's my EVP? What do I want to create as a work environment for my people? This is what's actually super fascinating right now, because I personally really believe there is no one size fits all. It's business travel as such, or even mobility used to be a perk, but now more than ever, the perk is going to look a bit different because the package is going to be different. But more than ever, it's the opportunity to make your company culture even more alive and stand out, and think about the type of talent you want to attract.
Yeah. Again, sorry, going back to the bank, this is what was interesting, that they went, the full remote way, being driven by the chief security officer. Basically straight away they said, right, if you work remotely, you do everything via your mobile phone, we will pay for your new phone and the highest broadband, roaming spec you can imagine, because then at least we know it's controlled and it's safe. And it's little things like that which probably aren't very expensive to a company, but would make all the employees think, well, actually, this is being taken seriously.
But then taking that to the next level, then what are on the business travel space, then, Matt, the companies that are leading this, that are leading the innovation in this space? So for you, Matt and Orly, be interested to see if you are hearing any other leaders in the space, taking a very innovative approach.
I talked to one company yesterday or day before, and I don't know if you remember, there's a dating app called Ashley Madison. So they're a Toronto-based tech company, 150 people. They rebranded to Ruby, so they're called Ruby now, Ruby Life. And so they went remote, and they are now closing their offices. And what I thought was interesting about them is that they've taken remote work as a kind of stepping stone to other things. So they announced recently a 4-day week. And they've also announced unlimited vacations. Now, I know some of the bigger companies do that, but now, you're going to see maybe companies of 100, 150 people going down that route, which then opens the door for people to travel and not feel, perhaps guilty about being on the road, etc. And then the other thing they were saying is, they give, and I think companies that are leading the way are companies that are doing this kind of in a very bespoke way. So depending on the managers, so if you've got managers in, say, product development, they might say, right, sorry guys, I need everyone in the office once a month. That's their choice, so it's got to be manager led, and then they can be, bespoke policies. So for me, that's like a really nice example of a company, doing it well.
But then, like you say, not looking at it in isolation, but looking in a holistic way and connecting it to other employee benefit and offerings. I get you. Maybe then, already good to chat to you about how have you seen it from an actual individual remote worker perspective? Like, tell me about your experiences, your joys, your frustrations. Walk us through what it's been like being a remote worker for the past couple of years.
Well, personally, to me, like the biggest benefit is freedom. Because you actually feel empowered and you feel good because you get to work in an environment where you feel most productive, and also when you feel most productive. Because for me, occupying a chair from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, is not necessarily the environment where I feel productive, and even the work hours where I want to work. Maybe, and I mean, everybody has that, even people who have kids. So so that's the first aspect. Then for myself, I used, like, pre-COVID, I talk in a past tense. Hopefully I'm going to be able to talk in future tense soon. I used to combine all my trips, mostly in Europe, and I spent more time. I explored the destination, but it has to. Our model is a bit different as well. So if you're a pure employee, you also need a leadership that supports you, and that helps, that provides you, with the rights, no matter it's hardware or, that's also open-minded, helping you to manage time zones. all those little things. But there's a myth that people actually think you're on vacation. You are not on vacation when you travel while working, especially when you work full time. So what's interesting to see, and I've met a lot of nomads and even employees on my different, travels. Many of them they quit their job because their job didn't give them the opportunity to actually travel and see the world, or to extend the business trip and see, take that opportunity to explore destinations. And some people that I've met, even like in their early 40s back then, they quit their job. And they were like, okay, it's now or never. I'll never get to do that again. And when I asked them the question, so how do you picture yourself now going back to UK, Germany, no matter where they were coming from? And they were like, this really changed my perspective, because I couldn't picture myself going back to a job where I actually sit on the chair from Monday to Friday. So for me, it's been amazing because, for example, Asia, Thailand is amazing when you work in European time zone, because you do your own thing in the morning, because the time is perfect for that. So I actually got my PADI scuba diving certification. In the morning, I did my diving, and I logged in at 2 p.m., 3 p.m. on my computer, and I started my workday. So to me, it's like a perfect balance. And it's exactly what I said. You work where and whenever you feel most productive, as long as the job is done. That's very important, of course. But it's really about empowering, your people when you want to try to think about that. And but like you say, maybe not everybody wants to travel the world or to become a nomad 12 months a year. Maybe it's about a month or 2 months. And to my point earlier, this is where it becomes interesting when you work in the mobility department or travel department, because you might start to negotiate deals with other types of suppliers, because you don't want to stay in a hotel when you stay for a month abroad. You want to stay in an apartment or co-work space, co-living, whatever it is. And this is actually where it's super interesting. And I would say the power to the people, the share of voice in the opinions people have never been so vocal about what they want. So if you're a company and if you want to build a culture where your people feel happy to work for you, ask your people what they want, and take it from there, and then start to rebuild that chaos and that pyramid, the foundations. This is an amazing opportunity to rethink about the foundations.
I think when you think about that, you mentioned that like the importance of asking people, but you have seen some companies, ask people what they want to do. People said, we want to stay working, and they said, no, it's still time to go back to the office. So one thing asking them, but then how you use that data. I have a video question coming in that came in from one of the community, the global mobility community, Alex. I'm going to put this on and put that to you. It'll just take a minute, but this is from Anna Jarowski. Give it 1 minute.
Hi everyone, it's Anna, and I wanted to ask you a couple questions. First of all, I think we can all agree that the work from anywhere model isn't really a feasible one, no matter how you try to solve for it with employer records or global employment companies, or even just hiring contractors. You will always run into big compliance issues. On the other hand, we know that employees require it more and more, and especially for companies who can compete on the salary levels for the best talent, it is something that is a major perk. So we end up in this impossible situation where we have to broadcast a policy and put together a policy that is really compliant. So my question to you is how you go around that and how you minimize risk around it. Also, with the rise of digital nomad visas, do you think that is solving for any of these compliance risks, especially in countries that don't require the employees to, or never even prevent employees to work for a local company and only allow remote work? Do you think that sort of solutions that countries put together would actually help reduce the compliance risk? Thank you so much.
So, Alex, over to you.
Yeah, there's quite a few questions there, but you can hear it from Anna that there's mobility professionals are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Really, they want to offer this flexibility, but there's only so much flexibility that they can offer before they run into huge challenges. And she mentions the digital nomad visas, and they're fantastic. But then what about tax and social security? No one ever talks about the duty of care aspect, the healthcare aspect in that location. So there are big complexities. I don't think anyone's getting it right, and I don't think it's going to be something that governments just say no, it's fine. A lot of governments have lost out on a lot of tax revenue, and they're going to want to recoup that somehow. So you're going to see governments be stricter, not being easier on these aspects. So so it'd be interesting to see, but I think the challenges, of course, of compliance. I think technology. There's a role for technology here. Is gonna be a way of being able to facilitate this more. It's just there's new platforms and software and opportunities. It's just getting those out there.
Yeah. But to complement what you said, Alex, and maybe even Matt, you might even have perspective that I don't, but I've always been fascinated. Even pre-COVID, when we talk about leisure, for example, so the simple fact to extend a business trip and make it a leisure, add a leisure bit. So we talked about risk, compliance, and duty of care. So I've always been fascinated about why isn't there an insurance for that? Because when I ask around,
or just to jump in, believe it or not, there are companies like Insured Nomads, to name but one, that are actually going after that space for remote workers. So they're just one example. There's a couple of others as well.
Amazing. And I'm pretty sure as an employee, because I did ask those questions to many people around me, they would even be ready to pay that themselves, even if it's like, I don't know, $50 a month to have that freedom. And same as if it's about liability, sign a waiver or whatsoever. So that I guess the big question is, if we really want that to be a reality, we should find ways to make it happen. And why, even pre-pandemic, why didn't we struggle more? To come back to your point about the ROI of doing things. So it looks like some stuff that we're discussing, they're top of the agenda because the awareness now has been raised, but they're not that new if you think about it.
Yeah, very, very good point. I mean, it's very tricky I just don't envy being a global mobility manager or business travel leader at the moment. There are so many different interconnected risks. But then if you take a step back, then what does that mean about the future of the function? So the question I'd like to ask you all, starting with you, Alex, is do you think global mobility and business travel will merge into one function as a result of this? Or do you think they will stay, separate functions, and how will they change, let's say?
Yeah, so I think we were seeing it pre-pandemic anyway. We saw business travel sort of merge or mobility taking responsibility for business travel, and I think that we'll continue to see that accelerate as we work our way post-pandemic. I think it's going to mean more operational and administrative time spent dealing with the travel aspect. So additional resources is going to be key. But I also think it's a fantastic business case to implement further technology and automation within global mobility.
And what about you, Matt? What do you think? How do you see the two of them? Do you see the two of them merging? I mean, part of the operational challenge, from my sense of it, is that business travel reports into finance and procurement primarily. They have a very much a cost-driven mindset, typically, not always, but primarily. Whereas global mobility reports into HR. It's a very different approach. I mean, how do you see it? Do you see the two of them merging, and if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes down to money, doesn't it? Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, if it's costing a company a lot of money to, have people jet off to Bali for 3 months every now and then, etc., then it's gonna get reined back, I think. But eventually, I think there will be more collaborations. There has to be. But I'm intrigued by these job titles you see, which we didn't see that often before, like head of remote. So, for example, Darren Murph from GitLab, who's probably speaking at seminars once a day at least. It's fascinating. He's kind of been doing this for such a long time, and you'd imagine more companies will have remote departments and a head of remote to deal with this, and then you'd have travel, HR, finance.
But then does someone like Darren even deal? Just putting the question out there, does he even deal with the global mobility aspects or business travel aspects, or the tax and compliance side of it, or is he more just like the cultural kind of curator of remote and policies and things like that? So it'd be fascinating to see the different definitions of head of remote varies across companies as well.
I guess he's the face, isn't he? I mean, very very visible. And I think if you've got that in a company, then you know who to turn to and who to ask questions. So for me, that's there's more chief people officers. Obviously, they're getting involved with this. Travel managers, like I said before, they've got the chance to really move into that space and make an impact, I think.
Sorry, John. I was going to say, and to go back to your point, Matt, that you mentioned earlier, was the sustainability aspect. I think that's where mobility and business travel will if they're not already, partner together, because I think that's going to be key about, I know in the mobility space, they're looking at doing sort of, the orientation visits they're doing virtually, trying to minimize carbon footprint, minimize the size of, shipments. How can we offset shipments, household goods, etc. So I think that's going to be a key element. And I think also the business leaders see that, the cost reduction of doing things virtually is obviously works out a lot better for their bottom line.
Yeah, and I guess you haven't got these offices. Offices generate a lot of carbon, don't they? With electricity and the lights and the footprint in the manufacturing. So
exactly.
Just the travel of remote staff, is that worse or better than going into an office? Driving into an office. So that could be a bit of a dilemma in the future.
So then next question is for Orly. Orly, tell us your top 3 destinations, work from anywhere destinations. I'm really curious. I just don't make me too jealous, please.
I would say my first one is Colombia. I absolutely loved it. Medellin it's buzzing. I would say Medellin is the future Bali of Latin America. It's absolutely fascinating. The city is called the Silicon Valley of South America. There, and given the past of the city with the violence and stuff, this makes the vibes even more unique. And the people you meet there is pretty awesome. So yeah, definitely Medellin, Colombia. Then I really enjoyed Thailand. It's really cool. You hop, on an island. Wi-Fi is pretty good. Time zone wise, it's really nice if you're working with Europe because it plays in your favor. Food is amazing. I'm a huge foodie, so yeah, Thailand is really good. And the third, I would say, overall, Europe is really good as well because it's very easy to change places. But what I also wanted to highlight is more and more as well, when you talk to nomads, we're all much bigger fans of slow travel. Because again, like I said, we're not on holidays. So there's also that much time that you can actually, immerse yourself and enjoy. Otherwise, you're just a tourist.
That's an important point because I think the number one reason, motivation, when we did a survey as to why people travel for remote work is exactly that, to help explore the local culture. And I think maybe as a leisure traveler, you don't quite get the same opportunity to do it because you're kind of in and out. Whereas for a nomad, you can go there for a couple of weeks or even months and really kind of authentically get under the skin of the local people.
Absolutely.
What about then, Matt and Alex, if you could work from anywhere in any destination in the world, where would it be?
I'm relocating to France in a couple of weeks, so I'm going to have to say France. But I think overall, I mean, yeah, I mean, I've not been to Bali, but you just hear so many good things. So I'd put that as a number 2, and I guess South America would be number 3 as well. So
all good destinations. And how about you, Alex?
For me, well, actually, last year I spent a bit of time working remotely, first from Spain. So I actually lived in Spain. I'm an expat child. I went to school there for 11 years. So I went back there last year while the pandemic was hitting the UK. I actually drove over there and spent my 3 months there that I could, and then had to come back to the UK. And actually, I'm going back there on Sunday to collect my UK registered car that's been at the airport for a few months, but also
the hefty parking bill.
That's it. Yeah. Tell me about it. So it's been a bit of a challenge getting that sorted and trying to get out there. But I also spent a bit. I came back to the UK over Christmas and then went to the UAE, went to Dubai for New Year's, and ended up spending about 2 months living and working there, which is fantastic. So I'd probably say Spain, Dubai, and I really want to get to the US. I love the US. We do a lot of events there. I'd like to, maybe set up a base there one day, and along the west coast somewhere.
Go to Colorado if you get a chance. I had the best time there. Yeah,
I've been to Colorado. Yeah, I've
nice.
been to I've been to Denver a few times. It's very cool.
But it's funny just even listening to all these answers. That's something about travel that's visceral, that's emotional. It just taps in for so many of us. It taps into something very deep. Certainly for me it does. Anyway, we had baby number 3 about 11 weeks ago, and we just can't wait to go traveling again at some stage. Well, I have to say this was a really interesting session. I think we've got so much out of it, trying to think of where the future of this is going. And thank you all the audience for your questions. Really appreciate it for the panel and your remarks and your comments and your engagement. I'd like to finish with a question, really. We've seen so much change with work from anywhere. And I'd like to ask you, all of you, starting with you, Alex, where do you see the world of global mobility and business travel in 10 years' time? And what are the second and third degree effects we need to really kind of watch out for?
Well, it's a good question. And I'll tell you what, if I knew the answer, I think I'd be quite a rich man. It's 10 years. 10 years is an incredible long time. And we saw how much change there was in literally overnight. So it's difficult to know. But I think what Matt picked up on was the sustainability effects will continue through organizations. I think this will be a key factor as when people decide to physically move, or there's business travel. Are those trips? How are we offsetting the carbon? Are they necessary? And now with the introductions of remote working, can they be done virtually? I think the increase of DE&I and or how organizations are approaching that, and 20%, less than 20% of mobile employees are female. So I think we're going to see and the percentage is even less when you start going into minorities. So I think it's going to be that's going to be a key factor. I don't think where you're born is going to be a barrier to what you can do and who you can work for anymore. I think the opportunities are going to rise for everyone globally, and I think we're going to continue to see mobility be a key decision, a strategic partner within the business, and we're already seeing global mobility leaders actually being brought into discussions when companies are planning on expanding into new regions and being consulted on that. So I think that will continue. And of course, the technology piece is huge. And I think I always feel like mobility is a couple of years behind where HR, where the HR function is. And I think the implementation of technology and automation and potentially more outsourcing is something we'll see.
So a lot more outsourcing, thinking about the environment, and just this with the elevation of the role of global mobility leaders, I guess, in many ways. What about you, Matt? What do you think? How do you see business travel and global mobility in 10 years' time, and what are the second and tertiary impacts we've got to watch out for? We might not have considered.
Yeah, like Alex said, I think focus on D&I, perhaps more local, rural initiatives where people can live and work in, really remote locations, and maybe help those communities. And then, I don't know whether there's a case of more Wi-Fi and technology kind of helping in that way. But I mean, in a flippant way, I think, VR, virtual reality, headsets, I was expecting that to kind of happen and have a moment during the pandemic, but it hasn't. So in 10 years' time, you'd imagine there'd be sufficient advances in technology. It sounds a bit sci-fi geek here, but there's got to be scope for that, where you can have those more, realistic interactions with people, whether it's meetings. I mean, there was one thing we picked up on where they, it's an American company, they've got the headsets, and they drop in kind of scents and oils, so they could recreate forest, and everyone gets a bit more relaxed. So part of me,
there's actually a company that does that. So meetingroom.io is a company that does virtual meetings. Basically, they've had some great success with the pandemic. So you're right, yeah, it's something to watch.
Yeah, so in 10 years' time, where would that I think that could actually be pretty important. If we've been Zooming for this long, imagine what a good kind of virtual experience could do.
I believe Google are actually working on a very sophisticated kind of a enhanced video platform where you can really see, it feels like you're speaking to somebody right opposite you. So those solutions are already being worked on, and it might not even be 10 years off, could be even earlier. So some very interesting thought-provoking points there, Matt. And what about you, already? What do you think? What are the things we need to watch out for? Where do you see business travel and mobility in 10 years' time?
So first of all, I don't think that travel will go away. It will, I guess, inevitably be reduced, but for the exact reason you just mentioned, because it's so emotional. And we can have and I'm a tech geek, but we can have the best technology ever. It will never replace, living the experience. And what I see is more of a borderless workplace in terms of functions. Speaking about mobility, travel management. So it's more about the corporate travel as a service, if you want. I can see more that role as being the pivot. And sometimes working with HR, sometimes with risk, sometimes with mobility, but it's going to be more of a pivot role. This is again, nobody has a crystal ball, but this is a little bit how I see the borderless workplace evolving in terms of functions. Now, in terms of geography, it's exactly what has been said by Alex and Matt. It's about putting everybody on the same level, creating opportunities no matter where you are in the world. Even I saw a comment from our audience about, creating opportunities if you have like a weak passport, because this is very unfair.
That's true.
And I consider myself super privileged, to do everything that I've been doing the 7 years. And to my point about purpose, traveling, whether it's for business or leisure, with a clear purpose, ethics, share knowledge, do something nice, something good for the community. Whenever you're going to be on a plane, hopefully by then we will have more green energy and we will travel with less carbon, footprints. But when you travel, make sure that you create something positive for the local communities, that you're visiting.
I think it's a lovely way to finish off the episode, Orly, and it's nice to actually have you on the other side today. Listen, nice. I was just conscious of good. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and thank you all. Thanks to all the audience for being part of today. Thank you, Alex from the Global Mobility Executive, Matt from Skift, and Orly from Festival Road. Thank all of you for being part of this episode, and for the audience. If you have any questions, you'll also be able to reach our panelists afterwards as well. A massive thank you, and we're going to leave you with a short little video to get you excited for next week as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.